Welcome back. It's Jerry here again with a Happy Hootie, and I've got a fantastic project today dealing with all of this stuff. My wife has accumulated entirely too many clothes, as most people do, and as well as too much junk that the shelf that this sits on is no longer able to bear the weight, and thus it is starting to cave in on itself. Let me show you a couple of the problems that this one has, and then I'm going to show you how to fix it. The first major issue that we're going to have is going to be with regards to brackets pulling away from the wall. So because there's so much weight on top of this, these brackets, if they're not secured back here to the wall, as you can see right there, and this is typically because the screws that go into this don't go far enough into the wall, or they're not anchored into a stud, and so eventually they're just going to pull through that sheetrock, or in this case also this cedar board, and it's going to start to pull forward until eventually it just is going to pull out of the wall. The second issue that's created is because the center of this starts to sag down, it ends up pulling up off the back, and there's a huge gap back here. The back shelf is actually lifting up and separating, and it comes down and actually connects into the middle, but this back part is lifted off so much, and then it allows this part to slide, and it's creating a precarious situation that's going to create a problem where this whole entire thing is just going to collapse. So the first thing we need to do is remove all the stuff. I might also add, this is a great time to go through and thin down some of these things. Just thought. Now that all that junk is removed, we got to probably remove this shelf too. This is the effect of the problem, is this is sagging, but it's not really the root of the problem. The root of the problem has to do with how this is anchored and supported into the wall. So in order to fix that, we're going to have to remove this top shelf. In my particular case, it happens to be screwed in to this bracket, so you can either use a power screwdriver or a manual one, whichever one happens to fit. In my particular case, you may have gotten a little bit lucky. I think if you listen, it's really solid there. This is probably a stud, and it sounds hollow over here. So where it sounds real solid, there's probably a stud right behind this. My guess is the screw that they used probably was just to attach to this piece. It doesn't go all the way back in to the stud. And that appears that may be the case. It might have gone back into just the sheetrock right there at the end. So it went through here, went through the wood, into the sheetrock, but wasn't long enough to get back into that stud. So I'm hopeful that if I try to use a longer screw and put it in there, I can drive that back and pin that back into the stud. But if that's not the case, there's another solution. If this was just going to be going back into sheetrock, you can use a little wall anchor like this that will screw back into the sheetrock and then screw into this. This will help secure it a little bit better. A better solution would be to get one of these butterfly anchors that you then essentially pinch, push back into the wall. They spring back out like that, and then as you tighten them down, it will pull the sheetrock and the entire thing back up to this, pinning this back to the wall as well. Ultimately, the best option is going to be to hit a stud, so let's hope that that's the case. I'm going to give that a try and see if we can't pin that back. I want to have something long enough that can go through this 3/4 inch piece of wood, and it's got a straight shaft on the back side of it, so that when it actually gets down in there, it will pull and tighten that back down. I've also gone ahead and put a washer on this. Probably not necessary because it's going into metal to support it, but there's no reason to be extra cautious there, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to put that in there and drive that in and see if we can't hit a stud. We did not. Now, I know that there's a stud back there. What I'm going to try to do is one other thing, and that is to go from the other angle and kind of drive it back into the other side to see if I can hit the stud from the side. We may have just missed it, and that may have been the problem they had with it the first time. So we're going to go ahead and drive it at an angle from this other way and try to hit that stud. I know there's one there, so we're going to give it another shot. think we did. That is not going to go anywhere. That's what I wanted to see. Now that we've got that secured in there, I'm going to go ahead and put the shelf back on there. It's still going to be warped though, and we're going to need to address the corners to kind of pin that down and make sure that it stays in place and stays flush. Well, let's get this loaded back up first. Now that this is up here, you can see that it's better, but there's still definitely a gap at the back corner. It's a little more noticeable down here at this end. You can see that there's a gap up against there. That's because this board has become warped. And that's mainly because it's not really attached anywhere but right here in the middle, and it rests along that channel on the outside. So what I'm going to do is go on the top up here, and I'm going to anchor this down a little bit on the back edge. Okay, to pin these corners down, because this thing is pretty warped, I'm going to go ahead and use these little, I have these spare angle metal brackets. You can use a piece of wood, just a scrap piece of wood, and put it along the back and just screw it into the wall once you pin this down, and that will push that down and allow it to stay. I just happen to have these little brackets. It came off of something else, so I'm just going to use that and just actually attach it into the wall. I'm not even going to attach it into the bottom part of this. You've got two choices, either manually trying to push this down yourself, or have a helper, or if you happen to have something else like a weight, you can use that to help pin that down, or you can then put that in place. And that'll keep that from popping up. Doing the other side, same way. I put a couple of weights on there. I'm going to go ahead and put this back up against the wall and drive a screw into there. And that'll pin that side down as well. Now to go ahead and finalize this, I'm going to go ahead and attach this back where it was when we took it off. And that'll just pin the middle back now. I'm going to go ahead and put this hole back in here. Inserting it in the one end. And then it goes into that other one. And because this no longer sags, this is kind of springy there. So we're going to go ahead and put a screw in the bottom of that to pin that down as well. Kind of like it was before. And now, we're ready to hang the clothes. And there you have it. Perfectly secured shelf. It's now even, and the clothes have been thinned out and evenly distributed. A couple of takeaway tips. One, if you're going to have heavy items, typically put those on the ends where they're more supported over an end instead of putting all the weight in the center of a shelf. And secondly, distribute your clothes evenly. And thirdly, if you have any really heavy clothes like wedding dresses, full-size suits, heavy sweaters and things like that, typically put those towards the outside edge where they're more supported versus in the middle where it's going to cause that a little more stress to collapse in the future. I do hope you found this helpful. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time.